I don't know where to start this time, Pauline, but we start with the Supreme Court record, I suppose, defining very clearly the rights that have been defined in this Australia. And this is where we get to talking to you the way we do. And I'm kind of proud to see you listen and actually go into that parliament and stop the waffle a little bit and just hit the questions. You got more time to hit questions if you stop the waffle. So, where do we start here, Pauline? We start with a government that you operate for that has undermined this country for the last 70 years. And the actions of this government have led us to today. Our inability to defend ourselves on a world stage because of the way this government didn't want the children to be able to manage themselves. They needed to nanny the children, didn't they, Pauline? And they're still doing it today, aren't they, Pauline? Because Australians are just sheerly incapable of realising that as fathers and sons, they are the Defence Forces. This doesn't sink into their heads, Pauline. They keep classrooming this and researching it and believing that they need to find out how to be it. And they haven't been drummed into their heads that as fathers and sons throughout this country, they were disarmed by John Howard. Now, it's kind of funny that Abbott and Howard and Costello and all these former Federal Executive Council types are speaking up against this machine change right now, Pauline. But they're kind of right in a way, because it's better to know the devil you know than to deal with something that's completely unknown that wanted to bring a forced medical procedure upon all of you in a forced industrial revolution. I believe Klaus Schwab used the words genetic modification, Pauline. Like, if they take this jab and then they get a genetic modification, they're not themselves anymore. What are they then, Pauline? These are all questions coming to and fro during this whole entire war game that you've pushed on the population for the last 4 or 5 years. But now you've come to this realisation point that my warnings that were given to all of you 15 years ago are starkly apparent. You have no way to defend your country anymore. You believe the Australian Defence Force has the ability to defend your country when it's obligated to the Pacific Rim. You know, the reality has to come, Pauline, that the Australian Defence Forces signed themselves up as Marine Forces in 1974 to foreign powers. This reality sort of has to come. So we're going to look at two bodies here, Strategic Analysis Australia and the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. So both of these organisations have come out recently saying that we're unable to defend ourselves as a country because John Howard disarmed the entire population, but they're not willing to say that it's them that disarmed us, but now they're willing to say that we need a militia. No, Pauline, we don't. We need to return back to the former crown that we were as the defence forces of this country under the Australian Imperial Crown and the Australian Imperial Forces, those fathers and sons all across this land, raising a federal red ensign that they were before your blue ensign arrived under the Flags Act 1954. Flags Act 1954, Pauline, right? And then that Admiralty ensign, 1st of March 1967. Pauline. So we start with this Australian Strategic Policy Institute, everybody. Now, they're linked at the hip with Washington, D.C. Australia is proud to have established an ASPI office in Washington, D.C. It is fitly announced that the ASPI's 20th year of operation and the 70th anniversary of the US-Australia alliance. 70 years. When does that take us back to? I wonder. Is that post-World War II, post-Menzies, post-lie to the people, post-take their weapons away from them time, and then change their nation altogether, and then go into the Indo-Pacific? Australia has deep interest in shaping strategic policy, thinking in Washington, D.C. What if it's the other way around, Pauline, and we're told these stupid words when we see the war game that's going on from an Australian Imperial crown anchored down in the Shrine of Remembrance at the Stone of Remembrance, Pauline? With our curial right to raise our land forces, our fathers and our sons all across this country, who can stand to a federal red ensign and defend their very lands with the full force of war without even asking you, the Parliament, because Isaiah 9:6, I believe that the Parliament is formed on the shoulder of the Crown, being the Australian Imperial Crown, the line of authority defined in the Supreme Court of New South Wales, Pauline. So we look further at this mob, because this is the mob that played the sob-sit ideal on the media, Pauline. This is the mob that used Paul Farrell at the ABC to try and lie to the Australian population, and Paul Farrell got caught out, Pauline. Paul Farrell of the ABC Four Corners got caught out lying to the Australian population on the ABC media. And here we have 11th of August 2023, incels in Australia, the ideology, the threat and the way forward. So involuntary celibates, are they involuntary? Or is this the manipulated society that you've brought on them with the Family Law Court 1974 taking away their male estate from them and treating them like wards of state? And you don't want them to return back to their male estate where they could stand under the Australian Imperial Crown as the land forces that they were before the Flags Act 1954 changed their line of authority. It's very clear. Now, you've got an organisation that's now pushing an American ideology into the Australian land space. Why? Why is this organisation, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, seeding the Australian mindset, i.e. you in the Parliament, Pauline, with an American ideology? It's been called out on court record that the sovereign citizen ideology was pushed by the New South Wales Police, not the Citizenry. So if that's the actual case, then it would be the police pushing this incel ideology that you see all over the American TV for the last 4 or 5 years, seeding it all into your brains that this new word, incel, is actually a word, Pauline. When they don't want to say involuntary celibate, and I'm pretty sure that most men throughout the country aren't involuntary celibates, they've just got to deal with a society where the Family Law Court and the police don't give them their right at law. Treat them like wards of the state, Pauline. And now that they've made a criminal action, i.e. being caught out on the Supreme Court of New South Wales court record, Pauline, then I don't see how they can continue. The sob-sit, the incel, this is their ideology, Pauline. This comes from places like Matthew Reason in the Fixated Persons Unit in New South Wales Police Force. These are the people that create and seed this propaganda across our country. And they got caught out doing it on the court record, Pauline. The justice literally said that it was a delusion that you all believe. And we're here to crack that delusion, Pauline, because now we have these organisations coming out of this manipulated government saying this, Strategic Analysis Australia, we need a national citizens militia. No, you don't. Right? Your national government came here and set up shop when? All right? We're the Australian Imperial Crown. as so defined on the Supreme Court record. That means that those justices in the Supreme Court know that they have a line of authority in the Australian Imperial Crown, anchored in the Shrine of Remembrance, anchored to the Stone of Remembrance, Pauline. That means something about the Australian Defence Force and these war crimes, and this Brereton report might have something to do with the fact that you're a foreign administrating power on this soil. And Strategic Analysis Australia doesn't need national citizens, because what is the Citizenship Act and the National Trust Territory that you call a United Nations Trust Territory inside those acts, Pauline? What is naturalisation? What is boarding a foreign country in your own land? Luke 15:14-15. Okay, we sort of now know that we're not your national citizens. We're citizens of the cities we came from, the parishes in which our families grew up in. And it's very evident by the way your police forces and your councils don't hire the people in the towns that they came from. And then you end up with CEOs of councils that fly from the other opposite end of the country to come and run your town for you. And you end up with police from the opposite end of the state to come and control all of your children for you. This is the way that they set this country up, Pauline, and it's going to end. It's going to stop. So when we address this need for a national citizens militia, we're here. We are the Australian Imperial Crown, Pauline. We have a right to our fathers and our sons, Pauline. We have a right to our line of authority in our constitution, at which you administer, Pauline. So when we look at this article, let's read a little bit of it. Successive Australian governments have had a phobia about being seen, even remotely, to support schemes that smack of national conscription. But we also know that in a time of crisis or conflict, our regular defence force will need to expand rapidly and work with people without the years of intensive training required in the peacetime military. What they're saying to you, Pauline, is that they're the occupiers of this country. They run this country on behalf of a foreign power. They're not going to let Australians stand up in their Australian Imperial Crown. They're not allowing Australians as fathers and sons to stand up and not be wards of state anymore, because this is the way the police have treated us in a delusion, committing war crimes now recorded on the Supreme Court record, Pauline. Now, you haven't even addressed Lydia. I don't see the Australian Federal Police moving in and making charges and arresting these people for the specific crimes that I have pointed out to you, Pauline. We are in an international peacetime military, so it says here, Pauline, and they want to train a citizen militia, not a God-driven defence force that are defenders of the faith of their own country and their own land, and standing side by side, Dreamtime Aborigine as one people. No. They want to continue this conscriptive model of militia and maintain control as a foreign occupying power on this land that has committed war crimes in Afghanistan, known to the Brereton Report, and in New South Wales, known to the Supreme Court of New South Wales, and your Australian Federal Police are still sitting on their arses, Pauline, in peacetime military warfare, as defined by Strategic Analysis Australia. Now, to strengthen, we'll read a bit further on, Pauline, to strengthen our national security, we should be looking at options short of conscription and which would be as hard to sell to the Australian people. The time is right. There's now a latent appetite for our political leaders to introduce measures to bolster national resilience. Well, we don't bolster national resilience. You stand on our shoulders, Isaiah 9:6. We're the federal forces here. We're the Australian Imperial Crown here. We're the defined line of authority in the Constitution, Pauline. So these Strategic Analysis Australia and their partner group ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, are demonstrating that they don't want the de jure country to stand up in a self-determination as defined in international law within the United Nations. No. They would prefer to keep putting people into $1 trillion debt so that their children would be in debt until the year 2100. Now that's how these people played, Pauline. Instead of looking at the actual problem and looking at their Anzac as pointed out to them over the last 15 years. No. The Australian Defence Force has to go and serve a foreign crown, foreign to the Anzac, Pauline. They don't fly the flag of their Anzac. They're not linked to the lineage of their Anzac. They're a foreign imperial power, Pauline, to the Anzac, as so defined now on a Supreme Court record by Justice Lonergan in New South Wales in 2021. This is followed up by the fact that the Justice in Queensland called Queensland corrupt. It's on court record, Pauline, and your Australian Federal Police are just sitting on their asses, sitting on their hands doing nothing. So do they have a failed command as well, like the Governor-General's office and the New South Wales Police Force? I mean, that New South Wales Police Commissioner is surely a failed command watching the news. This is where we're at, Pauline. Yeah, you've got an Australian Imperial Crown that are the actual owners of the Constitution by law, as defined on a Supreme Court record, putting all of you in the Parliament there in a foreign curial power. A foreign curial power that's now talking about putting up a citizen militia on my land, my people. Do you understand that now, Pauline? And you're talking about a citizen militia. A citizenry for the national citizenship instead of the curial right they hold as fathers and sons and citizens of their cities and towns. Now, you explain to all the people of Australia what happened to the Burgess Register of all of these towns, Pauline. Now, you ask the Mayor of the City of Sydney or the Mayor of the City of Melbourne what happened to the Burgess Register for Sydney or the Burgess Register for Melbourne. These are both parishes, Pauline, the parish of Sydney and the parish of Melbourne. And I'd like you to explain to the people where their Burgess Registers went and why they're all citizens of a foreign power that came here to administer their financial position. I'd like you to explain to everyone, Pauline, why this administrator that can't even manage its own Senate and its own House of Representatives, can't even manage the financial position of Australia, has put us in this position in the first place where the ASPI and this other mob, the Strategic Analysis Australia, are both saying that you need some sort of defence force in this country, when it's very technically true that John Howard, from a foreign curial power, did commit treason in the Parliament in 1985 by talking about the removal of the head of power in this country at the time, okay, and then removed the guns from everyone and pushed the foreign curial right of a foreign power through the Australia Act. These are all treasonous actions at law when it's the line of authority to your constitution that's concerned, Pauline. And this is where I bring up King versus Casement 1917 and Lydia very clearly. We have explained to you very, very, very clearly the laws at which she has broken. And I'm not even finished yet, Pauline. So, this defence thing needs to be realised by all Australians that you, as fathers and sons, now I'm just going to Google something, let me bring up something very quickly, and we go to BibleGateway.com, and then in BibleGateway.com we just go to Numbers 1. So if you have a Bible in your hand, just open the book Numbers and read Numbers 1. And this is explained to you very clearly what you're supposed to do as a people under the Australian Imperial Crown, of which we've sealed on the court record, okay? And the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of the congregation on the first day of the second month. So we get this Passover thing, everybody's merged into a new realm and recognised the world, i.e. the stone of remembrance, as opposed to the stone of scone or the stone of destiny. And they recognise their homeland, right, in the tabernacle of the congregation. Now, if you go down into the shrine of remembrance, go downstairs, you'll see the tabernacle next to the Father and the Son standing back to back, where there are two flags that shouldn't be on the wall because they are Father and Son. They are not father of a different land and son of a different land. They are not motherland, fatherland to son. No, 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 no. That two men did not stand there in the first place. They were put there after World War II, when the sons of the Commonwealth repeated what the fathers did at World War II. So it's the father of the Commonwealth and the son of the Commonwealth, of which you become the son of yourselves. And you're supposed to defend in the lineage of those two things where this government has lied to you with an English and an Australian flag on the wall, pretending that they are the Father and the Son. No, 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 Pauline. The federal red ensign of the Australian Imperial force is what stands on the wall there, and the Son flies the exact same flag as the Father. So everyone needs to realise that. Take ye the sum of all of the congregation of the children after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go to war. Aaron shall number them by their armies, and with you there shall be a man of every tribe, every one head of the house of his fathers. So I'm telling all of you, as fathers and sons of your towns, get organised. Bring it to the table. We are already here. We are already growing with many other towns. Pauline, you need to look at this as a very real reality, because at some point we will have a right to raise real guns and teach our sons how to use them. And if this is what this national citizenry is talking about, no, we go one step further than that. We're the de jure naked owners of the Constitution, recognising our self-determination at the United Nations and our right to stand on our land, where you brought this problem of welcome to country. You created the division between Australians after you came here in 1967, and it's being realised by all Australians upon you. And this is what I was talking about over the series of audios that I've made. So I think we should talk about this a little bit further, Pauline, as the next episode goes a little bit more into the law.